Welcome to Tabletop Tommies. I'm Jonny.
And I'm Phil.
And in today's much anticipated episode, we're finally talking about the armies of the United States. We've got the books in hand. You got yours ready, Phil?
I've got mine ready, absolutely.
Delightful. And so, obviously, we're going to be talking through the book, seeing if it's good, see if it's exciting. Are the US a contender in V3 from a competitive perspective? To be honest, from my perspective, the thing I'm most interested in is it fun and exciting to play? Because V2 US were a lot of fun because of the fire maneuver, whizzing up the board. Like, they were very difficult to pin down. And so it'll be interesting to see if they've kept that into V3. I mean, from your perspective, Phil, what are you looking for in this book?
So I've been leaning into Marines in V3, as we've seen, and painted up a Marine army. So I'm interested to see what options I can now take with my Marines that I couldn't take from the main rulebook. And interested to see what national characteristics and special rules there are. Also, we saw a change with the Germans from V2 into V3, and from the main rulebook into the armies of. So hopefully, is that going to continue with US as well?
Yeah, and that is interesting that a lot of people had a lot of hopes on ways we could make armies more thematic, more fun. I feel armies of Germany didn't really deliver that to the extent a lot of people were hoping. And so stay tuned to see if armies of US rectifies that. I mean, would you say that's a fair statement, Phil, that Germany
Yeah,
was good, but it didn't go as far as most people wanted?
You can see my face there off camera. I don't mind Arms of Germany because things Tiger Race is cool, and was it Panzer Race? Panzer Race is cool, and the Gerbesjäger that was quite a big change. Being able to make an entire sort of force and give them that special rule, which wasn't stubborn or wasn't fanatic. It was something we hadn't seen before. So to be fair, I did quite like that. I'm interested to see how things fall out with the US. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think the Geburtsjäger were a nice one. Like that one, because you're getting a unique special rule. That was a really nice one. I think what stuff people were disappointed with was just like stubborn and fanatic. Like that's nothing that fancy really, especially because you're paying for it. It didn't feel as thematic as I think a lot of people were hoping for. But maybe USA is slightly different.
Yeah, maybe. And just to, before we move on, picking up on what we talked about Valley last week, and you said this as well, Jonny, that maybe we were hoping in the Armies of Germany that we would see some special selectors. So rather than being limited to you must take a rifle platoon and that unlocks one each of the others, maybe there would be some early war, for example, Blitzkrieg German selectors where you might have got, two air observers in the rifle platoon or something like that, or some kind of restrictions or limitations that either were in place or removed depending on which way you look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we jump into the book?
Firstly, I just want to say a massive thank you to Osprey for sending us the PDF and also very recently sending us the physical copy of the book. We can talk about it, which has been great. We've been sat on this for a while now, but now we know that we are free to talk and free to release. Here we go. But yeah, big thank you to Osprey Games. It's a lovely looking book. I remember saying this about Armies of Germany and also about the main rule book. It feels good. It's nice quality. There's some great photos in there. We've got the history bit, which remember Jonny, you were talking about with the main rule book and the maps and the arrows and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's a great quality book, and big thank you to Osprey for sending it through.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge thank you to Osprey. And talking about the quality of the book, it does feel like a nicer book than the V2 book. I think when I actually got it in hand, I was far more excited with the physical book than I was with the PDF. Because it's nicer than the V2 book, I'd say. And the V2 book wasn't by any stretch bad. So it is a really nice book. And the first sort of 24 pages approximately are like history, pictures. You don't get a huge amount of history. Like there's not details of every campaign and every battle.
No.
But there's enough. I think basically what they're doing is they're setting up the national characteristics that come in a minute, spoilers alert, where basically you've got a short little section on the US Army, a short little section on the Airborne, short little section on the Marines, and a short little section on the Rangers. And so that's, if you're sort of brand new, if you haven't seen a lot of World War II history, I guess, because you're brand new to the game, maybe as a younger player, that is useful to have sort of like a very broad overview of the war and the different types of forces that fought in it. But then we jump into what I imagine most people have tuned in for, which is the rules. So on page 24 is where we get the national characteristics. Should we look at V2 characteristics in comparison, Phil, first, or should we do it as we go through?
Oh,
What
I
do
think
you
if we do
fancy?
it, we do it as we go through because there are obviously some which are similar all the same and some which are not. Um, so I'll kick us off with Fire and Maneuver, which was one of your big favourites for V2. I think that's fair to say, Johnny, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in the start of the episode there, I was talking about it in terms of that. Like, that's the reason why I loved
Hmm.
US because the mobility meant they were very hard to pin down. It felt like because V2 fire maneuver, there was never a negative for moving. It felt like, well, in that case, I might as well move, which meant anyone who played US just sort of naturally played a very fluid, fast moving
Hmm.
game. So, what's happened in V3, Phil? Have we kept fire maneuver as it is, or is
So we've
it gone to
kept
V3 rulebook?
we've kept Fire and Maneuver from the V3 rulebook. So effectively, what you've got is the old rapid fire rule that the Brits had in V1 and V2. So Fire and Maneuver, Armies of US. For every 3 men within a squad armed with a rifle or a carbine, you may add an additional dice. So if you have 4 men, for example, you'd get 1 extra shot. This is a rifle or a carbine, not a BAR.
Yeah, there's so much wrong with this rule. I mean, I made a video about it, which I'll link in the corner, potentially, if I remember to do it, um, explaining why this is terrible from a games mechanics perspective. Because, firstly, you've made BARs pointless. BARs are like incredibly US. This is supposed to be like Hollywood World War II, isn't it? And there's
Yeah,
nothing more Hollywood than Tommy guns and
and
BARs.
BARs. Yeah, yeah,
The whole fire maneuver thing was built on World War One. The BAR was introduced, and fire
yeah.
maneuver was built as a doctrine off the back of the BAR. Like,
Hmm.
and so because you are suddenly able to lay down enough suppressant fire to do this,
Yeah.
it's just so disappointing. I think the other thing that it doesn't work well with is the fact that V3 shooting with rifles is a bit pants now because you put pins on, but even if I put 6 pins on you, it doesn't matter. And so
Yes.
suppressing fire doesn't work very well anymore.
Yeah,
And so
yeah, yeah.
actually, in V2, this probably wouldn't have been as bad because having a few squads putting suppressing fire on a unit so that when you advance, the squad who's advancing are being hit at like a super six,
Mm.
that doesn't exist anymore. And so actually, this is not good for that. The whole like two squads working in tandem to do the
Hmm.
fire
Hmm.
maneuver, which is what we're supposed to be doing. It's just really disappointing. I mean, counterpoint, because you
Hmm.
referenced the like, if we're going to be a little bit positive, you referenced rapid fire from the Brit
Yeah.
book. The mistake a lot of people make with that is only for a fire order, whereas fire
This
maneuver
is
does give
yeah.
you for advance as well. So there's that small benefit to fire maneuver,
Yeah, yeah.
but I mean, I'm it's just bad, isn't it? Because the thing is, I
Yeah.
mean, the thing that would make it good is if you could force your opponent down. So
Okay.
this is where it's good when you force your opponent down because shooting's not very good. Your opponent's not going down anymore from rifles, and even at point blank now because down doesn't give you an advantage. Like fire maneuver doesn't work as a concept anymore, especially with this change, and it's not fun. Now I'll yield the floor.
The one thing I will say, I don't think BARs are out the game completely. And this is not necessarily because of how good the BARs are. It's more because of the absence of the availability of LMGs. So there are LMGs available within US units, and we will talk about this as we go through, but they are definitely not as prevalent as they are for Germany, for example, or for Britain and so on. So if you want something longer than 24 inches range small arms fire, if you want something more than a rifle, a lot of the time as a US player, your only option is a BAR. It is frustrating. It doesn't count for the you shoot 3, you get an extra 1 deal. But I don't think they're completely out because there are times where you do want that additional range. If you've got forward deploying infiltrating squads, for example, and you want to be able to reach the back line, from turn 1, etc., and you don't have LMGs, I think there is a place for BARs. I can see you're not necessarily agreeing with me, Johnny, and I am trying to see the positive here. But you are right. This is Hollywood, Hollywood wargaming. And when you think about US, you think, in terms of the movies and Band of Brothers and Pacific and that kind of thing, you're thinking about Tommy guns, you're thinking about BARs. Yeah, it's a shame that they aren't included in this.
Yeah, and jumping on your point there about the forward deployers, the SMGs are the way to go there because you're 2 points cheaper would be my sort of counterpoint.
Well,
And
it's
then I think you're right. The place where we'll see these is if you can't have LMGs, because
Yeah.
I'd always save, if I'm doing sort of close assault, I'd always save the 4 points to get the Tommy guns with tough fighter as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And if I'm doing long range, I'd always take the LMGs for the extra 6 inches of range,
Mm.
because now it doesn't matter if you move. Whereas, because the counter argument with BARs and V2 was always, it's effectively a 36-inch range, because when you advance,
Yeah.
it's like you've stayed still. And so now I just don't think they have a home. I think short of like people who are determined to be thematic or get use from all the models they built in V2, I can't see people using BARs now, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm looking at my regular US Army where I've got 10 BARs I built,
Yeah.
for example. Yeah, and my current, my Marines Army for V3, there's two maybe, and I only built them because the first event was World Open War, and BARs were included in the 3-for-1 deal. So there we go.
Yeah, and to be fair, if pistols hadn't lost to a fighter in the
Yeah,
Marine squads where you can have pistols and a BAR on the same dude, that might have been worth it, because then you get basically the SMG but with extra range.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
that,
that was a great combo, wasn't it? The
yeah.
BAR, and then you pay for a pistol. Anyway, that's V2.
Should
We're
we
here for
move
V3.
forward into our next national characteristic now that we've determined the first one is a bit sad?
Yeah, so air superiority. This is exactly the same as it was in V2. So forward air observers can call an airstrike twice instead of once per game. You resolve the first airstrike. Once that's been done, you can then call in the second.
Yeah, without spending the same amount of time as we did on Fire Maneuver, this was fine and
Yeah,
actually got a big perk in V3
yeah.
until about, what was it, a month ago when we nerfed spotters.
Well,
And so what
yes and
could be
no.
great has been
Yeah,
made. It's gone back to sort of just like, so it did get a big step up from V2. It's
yeah.
gone back to maybe it's like halfway there. And so it's slightly better, but still, but I'm not taking loads of air observers just to make use of this national characteristic as my reflection.
Yeah, I really like air observers, and obviously the hard counter to them is flak. But even then, depending upon the type of flak unit, if it's a forward facing rather than a 360 flak, there's absolutely ways to play around it as the US. You start getting 4 airstrikes going on in the game, 2 airstrikes coming in at once, and you crisscross so that your entry point is also the target point for your second airstrike. You can put so many pins out, and if you combine it with engineers in half tracks jumping out and flaming when they've pins have been stacked up, and then morale checking on like double one, that's a really powerful mechanic. So I do like it. I take your point that the whole spotter, one spot, one spotting per turn, that has changed it a little bit, but this is something I think the US do very well. And if you like air power and like airstrikes, and airstrikes have got better in V3 because the rookie pilot's not as bad as it used to be. So don't sleep on this one, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the pins getting less important because you've got so many officers and they don't affect you for shooting as much means that unless you're experienced with it and it goes off just right, and so you're
Mm,
pinning out squads, let's say, I think it's a bit of a nothing burger quite a lot of the time. And so we'll see. I think there is a place for it. And like, if people are using it all the time, they could build up a specific play style with it. But I don't know. I guess it's fun. I'll give it that. It's fun.
yeah, and when it's mad when it goes off. It's great when you when it doesn't go off and you hit yourself because you roll a one and your opponent chooses your own one. Yeah, that's quite funny as well.
Yeah, exactly. Should we move into modern communications?
Yeah, so this is the same again as V2. So when units take an order test to move from reserve onto the table, do not apply the usual -1 penalty.
Which is nice. Like it's a
Yeah,
great rule, especially if you like to outflank. It's a lovely
yeah.
rule.
Yeah.
And now that we're seeing a lot of custom missions at tournaments where you're forced to reserve stuff,
Mm.
this is a really nice one, especially because it's all units, not just infantry. And
Yeah,
so,
and I was going to say with the changes as well to deployment zones and
mhm.
how far you can outflank from turn 3 and all that sort of stuff. Outflank has got better in V3 because of the way that the missions are set up and deployment zones and that kind of thing.
Yeah, this is probably the top national characteristic for me now. Like
Yeah.
this is the only of those three. This one's the only reason why I would play US now. The
Okay.
other two don't give me anything that I want compared to, let's say, Germany.
Okay.
Because I don't run a lot of rifles generally. Like I'm not running big rifle squads because of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
cover saves now.
Yeah.
Um, I like to take stuff that like knocks things out of a game.
Mm.
Rifles are good for pinning. Now that pinning doesn't matter as much, not my game anymore. And so modern comms is the one for me here.
Yep.
But then we've got what could be an incredibly exciting thing, which
Yep.
is similar to the. I say similar. It's that's probably an understatement. Similar to what we got in Armies of Germany,
Yeah.
where we basically get to theme our force depending on which branch it is, effectively.
Yeah, yeah. So this is by air, land, and sea. So you had Defend the Fatherland in Germany. This is by air, land, and sea. I want to say by land, sea, and air. That's the order I think of. But anyway, it's air, land, and sea. So what you can do in this then is essentially theme your units as airborne, marines, or rangers. So like you had in the Armies of Germany, if you want to take airborne units, so not actual airborne units, but things like your mortar or your officer team or your AT rifle and so on. If you want to make an airborne unit, you must take it as veteran and you must upgrade it to stubborn. Okay, so it's exactly the same as the Fallschirmjäger one was in the Arms of Germany. So for Marines, if you take the unit as veteran, you must upgrade it to stubborn for +1 point per man. And then Rangers, they must be taken as veteran and they must be given the following rule for 1 point, which is Rangers lead the way.
Yeah. And to be clear, the Ranger squad come with this built in already.
Built
So you're
in.
not paying a point on top of the squad when we get to that.
Yes.
Which I think is just a preemptive potential
Yeah,
confusion
yeah,
there.
and there was a few questions about this with Armies of Germany. So, if it's in Germany, if it was a Fallschirmjäger squad, for example, it had the stubborn built in. In the US book, it's going to have the stuff baked in unless it explicitly says otherwise.
Yeah. Thoughts on this, Phil? Because I have thoughts, but I'll let you
I
do
have
yours
thoughts too.
first.
So, airborne, veteran, stubborn. Rangers, veteran, Rangers lead the way. Happy with both of those. Marines, if taken as veteran, may be upgraded to stubborn. I, other than the availability of which units you could take as Marines versus airborne, I'm struggling to see what the Marines option here gives me, particularly when in V2 and indeed in the main rule book, you can take regular Marines with stubborn. What I think's missing, so Armies of Germany, for example, you had Gerbesjäger, Fieldcraft, Rangers lead the way, very similar mechanic. You had Fallschirmjäger, US Airborne, stubborn. You had Fanatic, okay, and now for Marines with SS, and now for Marines we've got stubborn. I would have said maybe for Marines, if taken as veteran, maybe upgraded to tough fighter for +1 point a man. So
Yeah.
there's a difference there between stubborn airborne, ultra fit rangers running ahead, yeah, and then Marines, particularly given that in the Pacific, more so maybe than anywhere else in any other theater that the US were in, a lot of the fighting was very up close and personal, given the nature of who they were fighting and also where they were fighting in terms of the jungle and terrain. So as a Marines player, I'm a bit disappointed, if I'm honest, with this one.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm disappointed across the board, really, because I think you've hit the nail on the head. The fact that, oh, wow, Airborne gets stubborn. That's new. Oh, Marines also get stubborn. Like, this is exciting. Like, it's dull. It feels like I think the problem is Warlord built a lot of anticipation by holding this back for so long. Like they waited so long between editions. I think people were genuinely expecting a lot of thought to go into the mechanics and stuff, and for something exciting to have happened. This is dull. This is its biggest crime is it's boring because, I mean, counterpoint to like why you would take Marines over Airborne. The benefit is if you go an ultra thematic, let's say you go to a tournament that demands it has to be incredibly thematic, it does allow you to have the stubborn veterans alongside regulars, which the Airborne list wouldn't let you do. Everyone would be veteran. But it is going to feel like playing the same game, basically. It's
Okay.
going to like playing Airborne. You're right. Doesn't feel any different to playing Marines. And
Yeah,
I think
well,
you're right. Even just giving them Fanatic or Tough Fighter or something different would have at least made it feel different, even if you've not actually spent any time to think about it, which is what it feels like has happened. They haven't spent much time thinking about this. A bit like the Minor Nation PDFs, where, oh, we have to give them a pass because it's a get you by list. This
Okay.
feels like get you by national characteristics.
So this is the thing that does really get my goat, and you just touched on it. We'll jump ahead to the units now because it's relevant. US paratrooper squad in the armies of US can be either regular or veteran, automatically get stubborn. I can take stubborn regular paratrooper squads in the armies of US. Okay.
Oh, so
So if I want to make my mortar team, my bazooka team, my well, HQ, a paratrooper HQ, a paratrooper bazooka, a paratrooper mortar, it has to be veteran and it has to be stubborn. But I can take regular stubborn paratrooper squads.
yeah, that
Okay.
doesn't make sense, does it?
No, and then it gets worse because when I look at my Marines, who in the main rulebook and in V2 could be stubborn and regular, only veteran US Marine squads may be stubborn in armies of US.
Yeah.
So one of the things that stood out previously with Marines was you had regular stubborn Marines and you didn't have an easy access to regular stubborn troops in V2 for the US outside the Marines. There was the odd theatre book that brought in an airborne unit or a glider unit that potentially was regular and stubborn. This is gone now. And I just don't get it. I don't get why, if I want to make a non-paratrooper squad a paratrooper unit, I have to make it veteran and stubborn, but I can take regular stubborn paratrooper units, and I can't take regular stubborn US Marines. If I want to make something stubborn, so I want to make something a Marine that isn't a Marine squad, it's got to be veteran in order to be stubborn.
Yeah.
It's just,
I
it
mean,
doesn't tally up.
if we're jumping ahead as well, I have a gripe
Mhm.
about these that isn't about those two, which is Rangers lead the way. Like, is the one that is fun.
Yeah,
Making stuff stubborn, yawn fest, every army's like that, boring. Having a full army of Rangers is cool. It's fun, potentially a little bit competitive, probably not over the edge because it's a one-off maneuver. It doesn't like it's a one-off maneuver that your opponent gets signposted to before the game even starts. You know what I mean? Like
yes.
he's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
run
yeah.
at me.
You know what's
Okay,
going to
don't
happen. Yeah.
stand too close. But they haven't given the ability to be lead the way to
Yeah.
everything which thematically should be in a ranger list. And the one that like just screams out to me is there's no way to take a flamethrower with lead the way, which is because they've heard the echo chamber saying flamethrowers are dangerous, and
Mm.
they've decided, oh no, can't possibly give them lead the way. But the rangers were issued flamethrowers. Additionally, the old Ranger box before they just re-released it used to
Had a
come
flamethrower.
with
Yeah.
a flamethrower, and so the fact that you can't take a Ranger's flamethrower in any
Yeah.
way, either as part of like an engineer squad or as a
Yeah. Yeah.
team, is absurd. Like it's just it was the one glimmer of hope I had for these national characteristics when I first got the
Yeah.
PDF that, oh, well, you've killed the US for me. I have no interest in playing the US anymore because you've killed Fire and Maneuver, but perhaps I can find some joy in playing Rangers. And
Yeah.
then as soon as I realized that actually I'm going to have to take non-Rangers units in my thematic
A
Rangers
new Rangers
list,
force. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
what's the
You could say,
point?
so your engineer squad, it comes with the air, land, and sea option, but only for Marines. So you can make a Marine engineer squad because there's a separate entry for an airborne engineer squad. There isn't a separate entry for a ranger engineer squad. So you're right. There isn't the ability for rangers equipped with flamethrowers, despite it being something they did, and also it being in the box in the old Rangers Lead the Way Warlord box. Now, I'm not saying that makes it right just because it was in the past, but you're right. It is missing. It is a gap.
So I think that's probably enough complaining about national characteristics. Should we move to the Quartermaster stores and see what he's got in stock at the moment?
Yeah, so you get the demolition charges. Very, yes, it's essentially the same as what we saw in Armies of Germany. The Cullen Hudro Cutter, which was the feature from V2. If you're wondering where gyro stabilizers are, it's no longer a Army special rule. It's within the Quartermaster stores. So you do still get the gyro stabilizer rule, which I actually think is a reason to consider taking US. So take Germany, for example. Only one of your veteran tanks can have Panzer Ace. Yeah. Whereas with gyro stabilizers, any veteran tank that has the gyro stabilizer rule gets the benefit of gyro stabilizers. So that that is something.
Yeah, and I think it is fun. I think it's a good one to highlight because it is a fun little rule. I
Mm.
don't think it's, for me, it's not a reason to pull the US out for tournaments, but it is like if I'm planning to go to a thematic tournament, run 3 veteran Shermans, or maybe it's like a couple 105s. This is a great rule and a lot of fun. The thing that's interesting though is now that's not a national characteristic. In those situations where you can take vehicles from other lists,
Yeah.
you are potentially going to benefit from it. Now, most of the time when that happens, you don't get to take them veteran, so it shouldn't come
Yes.
up too often. But I
Partisans, for
think,
example.
yeah, but I think every now and then there's going to be a foreign nation who, because this is now equipment rather than national characteristic, will get the benefit of it. Like, for example, the Lend
I
Lease.
was going to say Lend Lease is the obvious one, isn't it, at the moment? Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what the Soviets get in terms of Lend Lease, but and the Brits, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
But if that just says the Sherman entry and
From
it
the
can be
US book.
veteran,
Yeah, yeah.
then you get to be gyro stabilized, which is interesting because I don't believe the Brits used the gyro stabilizers to
No,
the
they
same
ripped them
effect.
out, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly for the Soviet book, that does need to be sorted out. But in terms of we're in this weird situation where Lend Lease got added as an FAQ. The wording for Lend Lease currently in V3 is lifted from the V1 Soviet Union book because there's question marks over the scout car. You know, the scout car for the M3 scout car is listed as an armored car. Now that's because in V1 the armored car was a slot.
Yeah.
Can you take an M3 Scout car as a transport vehicle for Soviets under Lend Lease? Well, rules as written in the FAQ, no, it's an armored car, which doesn't have a transport capacity. So that needs tidying up before the Armies of Soviet Union comes out, in my view.
Yeah, and what'll be interesting when the Brit book comes out is how this has been dealt with, this gyro stabilizer issue, because if you just say you can't use them because it's not
Mm.
historical, then I'd hope they'd get a discount because I assume gyro stabilizers has been
It's
factored into
costed.
point
I would
cost.
imagine it's
Yeah.
costed. Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
even if it's just a cheeky 5 point upgrade,
Yeah, yeah.
if you're paying the same price for a veteran Sherman for the Brits and US, but the US get gyro stabilized, that doesn't seem quite. It doesn't seem balanced, I suppose would be the
No,
word I'm looking
no,
for.
no, no. I would
Hmm.
expect in the Brit book you'll get the British entry for the Sherman, the
Yeah.
British entry for the Stuart, rather than Sea Armies of US. And that's when you start doing Sea Armies of blah blah blah. That's when you get problems where there's interactions that aren't obvious straight away until you start delving into it.
Absolutely. I expect the same. I'm now going to be keeping an eye out to see what the points of a veteran Sherman are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Should we go to the last entry in the Quartermaster store though, which is the shotguns, which
yeah.
it's nice that it's there, but it irks me somewhat that shotguns became like very common in V2, and
Mm,
it's just astounds me that it never made its way into the rule book proper. Rather, and it's still like the shotguns are always still just like a peripheral rule in a armies of book, which is weird because it gives the potential for different people's shotguns to do different things if it's not in the
yeah.
main rule book.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're paying 2 points for them, and you're getting a reduced range, but you are getting tough fighter because you get the assault rule, and so not just tough fighter, you also ignore the move and fire penalty. Um,
Are they 2 points?
yeah, if you scroll down to like the Marine squad, they're two
Yeah.
points to upgrade from a rifle to a shotgun. They're not terrible.
Do you know what? In V2 they were pointless because the points cost was never worth it because you already
Mm.
had the assault rule,
You
just not the
ignored.
tough fighter.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Now, 2 points for
yeah,
some tough fighters isn't bad because you're getting fire and maneuver proper
yeah.
and tough fighter for 2 points. So I actually quite like that. If you could do full squads with them, I'd be game. But I've got a suspicion that the most we're going to see is 3 in a squad.
I think so. Yeah, I've obviously looked at the Marine entry, and you can put X number of SMGs in a squad and also some shotguns, and you suddenly got a really tasty unit that is jumping out of an armored vehicle. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, just a bit pricey. But
Yeah.
segueing into the officers, what I'm
Mm.
hoping to see here, because armies of Germany got a lot of weapons choices, a lot of men.
Yeah.
Speaking of shotguns, what would be really cool is if your Marine officer can take shotguns, because that does feel thematic and would be really cool. But I don't think it's there, is it? What is there?
No, so you do get some interesting HQ options. So you'll be pleased to hear, Johnny, that you can any man can be given a motorcycle for plus 5 points per man, um, and any man may be given horses for plus 2 points per man. That's not the bit that I was going to highlight. The size of the HQs unit is actually quite variable. So we saw this in Armies of Germany, where you could take more than the additional two men, and actually for the US, it's quite a lot. So start off with one, may be accompanied by up to five, so that takes you up to six. If it's airborne, you can add an additional two, so that's eight. And if it's marine, it's an additional one. So you can have a six-man army command squad, a six-man ranger command squad, a seven-man marine command squad, or an eight-man airborne command squad. One of them may have intelligence training, so you've got some interesting options there. Yeah, so I think there's some interesting things that you can do with command units in the armies of US.
Yeah, very similar to Germany, really, isn't it? In terms of like it has the same benefits and
Mm,
negatives as what we talked about during the Germany episode. That now your officer can be a little squad, but
yeah,
he is also very expensive now because he's paying for every upgrade.
yep, yeah.
Yeah,
Cool. You've got a medic, which you can take as airborne rangers or marines. If you so want to, you can take a ranger medic with up to four additional men.
that's cool. I mean, that
Yeah,
is thematic. If I'm going to take a medic from a Rangers, I want him to be leading the way.
yeah. You got chaplain, so that appeared in the sorry in armies of Germany. Be interested to hear actually from people listening and watching. Are they using chaplains in V3? Now, I never used them in V2, and my only real experience of playing against them was at the first World Open War, and Akios from Spain had one, and he did a wonderful thing where it was sat next to his quad flak, German quad flak, and next to a heavy mortar. And every time it activated, he just took one of the pins off, and which just allowed him to be more certain of firing either of those two things. That was quite a nice little thing. I don't see how they're being used in V3 and if they're worth it because of the amount of officers around ignoring pins and so on.
Yeah. I mean, I used one of Three Good Men with a Ranger
Hmm.
army, and I was doing a similar thing where what he was doing was he was taking one of the pins off the Rangers that then passed the test to lose their second pin. So there
Yeah.
was no negative to shoot, or he'd take their third pin off, let's say, so they're only at -1 to shoot.
Yeah.
Now that it's only ever -1 to shoot, he's not as useful and he's not very offensive. And so I think you're right that we're only going to see him at sort of like thematic events, or if
Hmm.
someone has 20 points to spend and really has no idea what to spend it on, then
Yeah.
he's a better shout for me than the medic, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. Although, again, having a medic, just babysitting an expensive squad, babysitting a veteran squad is not bad, to be fair.
No, it's every now and then it saves you. It's just the 1 in 6.
Mm.
Like it's probably confirmation bias, but like the 4+ for the chaplain regular is so much better than the 1 in 6. I think if
Yeah,
a veteran medic went up to a 5+, that would be pretty tasty. Then I'd be
yeah,
taking veteran medics all day long, I think.
yeah. Cool. And then yeah, your final thing in your HQ options is your forward observer, air or artillery. If you're playing US, why would you take artillery unless you're going super thematic? I think if you're going to take a forward observer as a US player, you're going to be taking the air observer.
Yeah, I agree. So this is a sidebar to the main rules. Now, the chaplain is not in any of the selectors in the main rulebook for the platoons. And so where can I take a chaplain?
It's a really good point.
Because I was just thinking the reason that came up in my brain was I was
Yeah,
thinking if you took lots of chaplains, so each platoon had a chaplain,
yeah.
that works well with your officer. You put your officer and your chaplain together, and they make a really nice little power combo for I don't know your
Ah,
mortar pit.
go on. You
But
finish off
um,
what you're saying.
but I'm not sure because I'm not sure where they fit in the platoon selectors basically because I don't think there's any reference to them.
They fit. So on the app, they fit where the company commander is. That's where you access them. So it's the additional HQ units section of the app. Where it actually fits in the force organization chart in the rulebook is another thing entirely. But I know
Oh,
when you go on the app, for example, and you go to choose a German company commander, the option for chaplain is there.
so what we're saying is rules as intended, if even if they never go around to writing it, may be that you have one per company rather than being a platoon limit.
Yeah, I guess so. I am thinking on my feet here, but yeah, let me.
Yeah, the chaplain's not in the main rulebook, is he, at
No,
all?
not at all. No, no, no.
Which is probably why this has been omitted. But I believe these were written as the main rulebook was written and released, and so like surely they knew the chaplain was coming.
Yeah, so in the main rule book, the only reference is you may take a single company commander.
What's interesting while you're just looking at that is
Mm,
medics, even though I don't really rate them,
yeah.
I would like to be able to take medics in like engineer platoons and stuff. Or like a recce platoon. I don't see why the recce platoon might not take a medic with them just in case. Maybe not super thematic, maybe not a huge
No, it's
omission
an
for most
interesting
people,
one.
but it would be interesting to have medics have more opportunities to take medics. I think that'd be
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
nice.
Yeah, so they appear in the app, they appear under the additional HQ options. You can only take one of them per army, so like a company commander. But that's not explicitly written anywhere.
No, that's nowhere. It'd be nice if it was. Maybe so
Yeah.
we get the FAQ
Do
inbound.
you know what's quite funny is the fact that nobody's asked this question yet, noisily and publicly enough. Otherwise, we would have picked up on it. But they've been available in the armies of Germany since January.
Yeah, and I didn't think of it during
No.
Armies of Germany, especially because when we were doing Armies of Germany, in the back of my mind, I thought that they'd added chaplains as a common
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
unit for all armies, but that's because I think in V2 in the FAQ, chaplains were added as a common unit.
Yeah.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, so if we get onto the main actual units you can take in arms in the US. So we're not going to do all of them to be honest, because it'll be quite a long episode. Um, you've got your basic US rifle squads. They're great, fine, whatever. What I do want to highlight is the armored infantry squads. Now, these appeared, I want to say, in the D-Day books, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I,
think so.
yeah, they
Around
were.
there, I think it was.
I don't
Mhm.
think they were soft underbelly and tough gut. I think they came before then. So these are quite interesting. So you get armored infantry rifle squads, armored infantry mortar squad, and armored infantry machine gun squad. They all get the mechanized infantry special rule, so that allows them to re-roll any failed order tests for dismounting transports. And if the unit gets destroyed, the transport they're in, they take D3 pins rather than D6. So it's the same as the Panzer Grenadiers have in the arms of Germany. What I think is cool about these units is, and if you think about historically about the US in World War II, their whole mechanized infantry doctrine was really well used. Certainly later on in Northwest Europe and so on. And it's having those sections with an accompanying half track where they're then jumping out of the half track, but it also opens up access to another bazooka team. So, for example, you take the armored rifle infantry rifle squad. For each of these squads included in the platoon, you're allowed to include one additional bazooka team in the same platoon. Obviously, only in selectors that allow you a bazooka team in the first place. I've been playing around with US for a while now, and there have been occasions where I want to take loads of bazookas, but I don't want to take a heavy weapons platoon because I don't really want the mortars, but I do want the bazookas. Now, this gives me an option to completely ignore the heavy weapons platoon, and I can take a rifle platoon or a recce platoon, start using the armored infantry rifle squad, mortar squad, or LMG squad, and open up more access to bazookas, which is a very characteristic American thing. In
Yeah,
terms of half tracks, guys jumping out of half tracks with a load of bazookas, and bazookas aren't bad either. So I do rate these as things to look at, and don't just discount US Army as well. They're not as interesting as Rangers or Marines or Airborne, because I think these three mechanized units are definitely worth looking at.
yeah. I think offensively, I'm not that keen on them. Like they don't pack enough of a punch anymore. But I think you're absolutely right. I think for something like Recon Rumble or one of
Yes.
these events where you're running a recce platoon by like you have to, and you need to take some anti-tank, this is a great way to do it. And
Yeah.
just half track these guys, bazooka in there as well. And for 1 point, that's
Yeah.
half the number of hits effectively. Like the D3 instead of D6 hits when the transport gets wrecked is big.
Yeah.
Now, the thing for me that is a bit of a shame is it'd be great if that applied to the bazooka team since he's only got two blokes. And so
Mm.
actually, if either the rule was you can have the bazooka as part of the squad, or if you purchase a bazooka alongside these for 2 extra points,
It
they
gains
also get
that.
motorized infantry.
Yeah,
Then
yeah,
we'd be
yeah.
talking. And it's just a bit of a shame. It's a bit like what I was saying with Rangers Lead the Way, where it feels like you're having to make a compromise where some of the units don't get the fun thematic rule
Yeah.
that makes your force cohesive.
Yeah.
But you're right. A recce platoon with like 4 bazookas would be
Mm.
cool.
Yeah, 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 yeah. If you take the mortar squad, you get a light mortar within the squad. So it's a rifle squad with a light mortar embedded in it, similar to the Japanese grenadier squads, for example. If you take the machine gun squad, you can take extra LMGs, as well as opening up these bazooka options. So they're pretty cool. You know, if you are if you're a player of regular US Army, um, definitely have a look at these units.
Yeah. And then we go to my favorites,
Yeah.
the engineers, who haven't really lost their luster for me too much. I mean, flamethrowers have got a bit of a they've had a bit of a kicking, but I still like a flamethrower
Mhm.
because of how universal it is. You can
Yeah.
attack tanks, you can attack infantry. Flamethrowers still have a place in my heart. The engineer squad can only be Marines
Yeah.
if you do land it, so you have to take them veteran. Other than that, it's a fairly standard engineer squad. I mean, you can have a demo charge, which is nice, but you can only have
Mm.
2 SMGs. So
Yeah.
once your flamethrowers run out, unless you've got a demo charge, you're a bit of a sort of a generic squad. As
Yeah.
you said, you've also got the airborne ones, which are effectively the same as I've just said. They're just more expensive because the stubborn's already baked in. So
Yeah. Yeah.
75 points veteran. Not much else to say about engineers, really, other than they're worth taking.
Yeah, what is interesting, so the engineer squad itself is early, middle, late. The flamethrower team is middle, late. So if I was taking a thematic, yeah, a thematic early war, and by early we're talking about North Africa, Operation Torch kind of thing. So an early war US list, I could take engineers with flamethrowers, but I couldn't take additional flamethrower teams if I was purely going by the early, mid, late distinction, which is a bit odd, if I'm honest.
That is weird. That is a really quirky one. Yeah, that's just, especially because it's the same air, land, and sea rule.
Yeah,
And like they've both got the same Marines only rule. And so, yeah, they should be able to fit anywhere where there's one, you can have t'other. But
yeah.
I mean, I don't think anyone's going to really cry about that because actually, I think flamethrower teams are that pricey. I'd nearly always take the 3 extra men just to give them something to do once the flamethrower runs out. And so I generally don't run flamethrowers, but I can see if you really want to max the flames out and take.
I was just about to say, so yeah, I roll call is coming up this weekend. I've got more than 4 flamethrowers in an engineer platoon because I can. If I only took 4 squads, I've only got 4 flamethrowers. I have maxed out on flamethrowers. So there are some occasions where actually taking flamethrower teams is beneficial because you run out of engineer slots if you're like me and have just taken a ton of them. But there we go.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to wait until we get there, but the other thing that is omitted here are the Marine support flamethrower squads, where
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
effectively, in the flamethrower
Mm,
team slot, you could have a squad of like 4 or 5 men, depending on whether you went for the US Army version or the
yeah.
US Marine version that was in the Pacific.
Yeah, I did see that, and I thought that was a shame because it's maybe less of an issue now. In VT, you had only one flamethrower team slot, and that particular unit from the Pilau book allowed you to basically take another squad in that flamethrower team slot. But it would be nice, yeah, if that entry had from Mariana and Pilau had come over.
Yeah, because it would have effectively meant you get 6 engineer squads
Yeah, 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 yeah.
without having to take another rifle platoon.
Seven, four,
Yeah,
four, four engineer squads, 3 of the flamethrower teams that were squads. I mean, we've just talked about my roll call list. That would have been awesome. Seven
yeah.
engineer squads. Let's go. So yeah,
And it wasn't stupidly powerful either because they made you pay for
you
stupid
had to
things
pay
you
for
didn't want.
BARs, didn't
And
you? And
so one
yeah,
of
yeah,
them had a BAR and anti-tank grenades, and the other one I think just had anti-tank grenades.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so there was a 10-point surplus on this squad with equipment you weren't going to use anyway. And
yeah,
so actually it was never overpowered. It just meant you could really push the envelope of how many flamethrowers you have.
yeah.
And so it's a shame he didn't make it. Should we continue with our review of the infantry choices in? Armies
Yeah,
of Europe.
so
So
if US airborne players, you've got a lot of options here. You've got your US paratrooper squad, you've got your glider squad, you've got your pathfinders, you've got your airborne engineers, glider machine gun squad. So a lot of these units appeared, if they weren't already in the Armies of US V2, V1, V2, they appeared in the D-Day books. So there's different options there in terms of regular, veteran, some stubborn, some you make stubborn. Um, Options for how many extra bits you add to them. But yeah, and obviously that ties in really nicely with the new plastic infantry box as well. So if you want to, you get the Kurahi starter army, or you get in the plastic platoon box. There's interesting stuff you can do there between the gliders and the airborne.
yeah, and two interesting things I'd like to note here, which is firstly the Pathfinder's giving you the reroll from reserve, pairs
Yes.
very nicely with your modern comms.
Yeah.
Great rule, I think there.
Yeah, LZ signals. Yeah, and that we saw that in V2, the LZ signals
Yeah.
and the Pathfinders. But yeah, that's a great combo there. Yeah,
And then the other thing, jumping back to your inconsistencies in the national characteristics and stuff, where you highlighted the paratroopers could be regular stubborn,
yeah,
the glider squads can only be stubborn if taken veteran,
veteran. Yeah,
which is like similar sort of weird quirk that I don't know, like the glider squads aren't as stubborn for some reason.
yeah, yeah.
But having talked about all that, what about Rangers, eh? How are you feeling about
I'm going to let
Rangers these
you talk
days?
about Rangers, Johnny, because you are a big Ranger fan.
Yeah. Um, Not much has changed for
No.
Rangers. I mean, I actually don't think a single thing has changed where, other than the fact that they've been given the mid and late designation in the period, and you can only take an LMG if it's late war.
Yeah,
Okay, sure. Otherwise, same points, same options, really. So you can only have three SMGs, which was always a bit of a sticking point for
yeah.
Rangers because you'd love to take five SMGs and just rush forward. But you're limited to three, which was never a huge thing. I think Rangers are always good.
Yeah.
And the sticking point is that I can't take everything as Rangers.
What is also interesting is in the US D-Day book, you had the whole Ranger selector, and you had some additional Ranger squads that were added in. That was where you found the Ranger Bazooka squad, where you can embed a bazooka team into a squad, for example. That hasn't made it through, which is a shame because that was really characteristic.
Yeah, and that was what I wanted more than anything.
Mm,
Bazookas, I've never rated bazookas particularly highly because it's one shot you often miss. But having them in squads is such a cool way to run them and gives them a bit of protection. Like, and it's not cheap. You're looking at like I think you pay 40 points for a bazooka, so it's sort of 110 points for a ranger squad with a bazooka.
mm, mm.
But it
Yeah,
gets
yeah,
them into the action,
yeah.
and it means that they can't be targeted. Especially snipers now can't attack them directly.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
would have been amazing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't see why that wasn't kept in because when that theatre book was written, it was deemed like thematic enough and
Mm,
fun enough. So
mhm.
why is it suddenly not fun anymore?
The fun police have struck them out.
Yeah.
Moving on to my fun police, so the US Marine Squad, as we've already mentioned, you get the US Raiders, which they appeared in. I want to say, oh, not Pillau, but they appeared in the what was the Empire in
Empire and
Flames?
Flames,
Empire in Flames. Yeah, yeah.
Jinx.
So these are stubborn veteran tough fighters. The bit that is a bit weird is they've got inbuilt tough fighters, but they're paying 4 points for an SMG. Now, what we generally see is that when you have a characteristic built in, such as tough fighters, for example, the cost of the SMG is reduced by 1 point because you've already paid for tough fighters. So if I'm paying 4 points for an SMG on a US Raider squad, I'm paying twice for tough fighter. It's a little
Yeah.
quirk. It may be nothing, but it does add up because actually the US Raiders are pretty cool as a unit. The models are great. I do like the metal US veteran Raider kit as well.
Yeah. And I mean, 15 points is you're paying 1 point for stubborn, 1 point for tough fighter. So
Mm,
it's not bad, really. I would like Marines that were tough fighter but not stubborn would be the
mhm.
thing that I would quite like just to save the cost. But not bad. I mean, if we compare them to the Marauders, so Merrill's Marauders, we're paying 17 points a guy for that because they've got four special rules.
Yeah, so the Mao's Marauders are a weird one because they obviously fought in Burma, so they were part of the US forces assisting the Chinese in northern Burma. It's the only unit in the entire Armies of US book relevant to this particular theater. Um, and it was the same in B2 as well. So it's not like you can build like a thematic Merrill's Marauders X and Y army, with the Chinese and the US support. They're pretty hard as nails. They're 17 points because they're stubborn, tough fighters. They've got fieldcraft, so they can ignore rough ground. They've got long range penetration, so they ignore. So they reroll failed order tests for coming onto the table. So they are pretty chunky units. But it's not like you can build an entire army around Merrill Marauders because they don't come into the air, land, sea brackets and jungle, or something like that. Like,
But
do
the
you know what I mean?
jungle's on land, isn't it?
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. And I suppose it's
a
quite
shame.
wet, so you could.
Yeah, yeah, it could be pretty
Yeah,
sea-like as well. Yeah, yeah. The
yeah.
rivers are pretty mad. The Irrawaddy and the Chindwin.
I
But yeah,
guess. I guess if you wanted to do it, what you'd do is you'd take your marauders as your core infantry, and then you would use the marines stubborn to basically
yeah,
do your small teams, and you would do sort of like jungle teams, like light mortars and stuff that they would carry through the jungle, and
yeah,
have them stubborn. But you're right. I think you're going to run out of things you want before you run out of points. I would think if you're
yeah,
doing
yeah,
marauders.
yeah.
We did before we move on to the cavalry. I just want to quickly jump back to one we jumped over, which was the I and R squad, the intelligence squad,
Oh yes, sorry, I meant to mention them. Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
interesting because, and now spoiler alert when we get to vehicles, the twin bazooka jeep, which was a pain to run in V2 because it was like it was one of those ones where you had like like a whole slew of criteria that had to be fulfilled before you can run it. That was basically the only reason you ever saw these. You now basically pay 10 points a man, so you're not paying anything for them, but they do spot hidden at 18 inches.
Yeah.
I mean, are we still using hidden? Like, does anyone use it as a rule? It's one that always gets forgotten. It's the infantry
Hmm.
equivalent of turret jam, isn't it? That it just gets forgotten about.
I'm sure there's an interesting mechanic or interaction between infiltrators, hidden, and so on. You're right. We don't see it very often, but there probably is a clever tactic involving infiltrating squads, deploying hidden,
And then you
fin-
and then you
finish
spot them really quickly.
dot dot
Haha.
dot.
Yeah.
Finish that sentence for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Should we move on though? Or do you have more to say about the intelligence and reconnaissance squad?
No, I have no intelligence on that. No. So the final three infantry squads, you've got the Philippine Scout squads, nice and thematic. These are the only cavalry options you get for the US. Well, I mean, it says early, mid, late, but they were basically like the first couple of months in the Philippines, and that was it. But anyway, early, mid, late cavalry, obviously only Pacific. US Army Military Police, these are like your Feldgendarme with your Armies of Germany. This actually is worth calling out because not only do you get to ignore your +1 modifier because of your national characteristic, you then gain the benefit of a +1 modifier when rolling to bring vehicles onto the table from reserve. So you've got a regular vehicle, US vehicle in reserve. You ignore the -1 because of your national special rule, and then you gain a +1 to bring them in from reserve because of the US police, the US military police directing you, which is pretty cool. So there's a whole thing here, I think, about US Army builds and reserves in terms of mechanized infantry jumping out, almost guaranteed to come on when you need them, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I agree. And I used to run these quite a lot
Mm,
in V2 as a way, as you say, to guarantee people come in. The thing is, though, here's the rub.
mhm.
The Germans have the exact same unit with basically traffic directions and a
Yes.
get back in the fight rule,
Yeah.
which is limited to only the Strafbat, etc. But they're 4 points cheaper. You're only paying 1 point upgrade per man. So it's 8 points a man, whereas these are 9 points a man. And I mean, admit it, as I say, like the German one only affects certain inexperienced units, the get back in the fight rule. But still, I'm a bit irked that the US ones are more expensive because you're not buying it for that rally rule. Because
No.
how often are you going to
it for
fail a
the
rally? Like, do you
yeah,
know what I mean? It's
you're buying it for traffic direction. Yeah,
yeah, and so
yeah,
that
yeah.
rally rule has minimal value really, unless you're doing it on
Hmm.
an inexperienced squad who've lost their NCO. But otherwise, when you're testing on a 9 and up, generally you're not that worried about having the MPs nearby. So yeah, that's just a real shame because again, like I was saying at the beginning, I'm looking for reasons for me to be enthusiastic about playing US over, let's say, Germany.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And actually, my MPs are cheaper in Armies of Germany.
Yeah, so your final squad, your rear detachment squad, these appeared, I think, in Battle of the Bulge. I think they are 6 point inexperienced men, basically. So they're 1 point cheaper. The reason why they're 6 points is there's two reasons. They have minimal training, so they may not use any of their nation's special rules. To be honest, it doesn't
Not a
massively apply
huge
to
loss
them.
there, is it?
Yeah. And we ain't foot sluggers. So they're made up of highly capable specialists in their field, but their knowledge and experience of battlefield tactics and procedures are limited at best. To reflect this, the unit always counts as having lost their NCO.
So they're very
They're
inexperienced,
very
basically.
inexperienced, yeah.
But you can have them with pistols for 25 points for five
Yeah, I
men.
know exactly where you're going with this one. Yeah.
So you could have four squads for 100 points.
Well, no, I wouldn't even bother with that. You for 70 points, you can have an
Mm,
inexperienced officer with a pistol. You can have two 25 point 5 man rear detachment squads, and you open up everything else from there. So if
yeah,
you
and then
really
all they
want
do is to
to,
just go down and
they just
rally on an objective,
yeah.
basically,
Or they sit in a vehicle
keeping it alive.
keeping it alive, or in reserve, and they're coming on without the -1 because of the national rules, because the vehicle doesn't suffer from their special rule.
Yeah, I mean, even at 30 points, if you want to keep them their rifles so they've got some long range plinking,
Hmm.
that's pretty good, you know. That's something that, because if we look at it sort of comparatively,
Hmm.
Shirker or -1
Yes.
morale, I think I'd rather have -1
I think,
morale.
I think you're right. Yeah. I've been looking at doing some CBs for my Marines and thinking, right, which unit would best represent my CBs, and potentially this could be the unit that does that, where they can shoot, they can fight, they're not shirkers, they're just not particularly experienced and frontline troops, the combat troops.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's the highlight for me of.
Yeah,
But I don't think it's new. I think we had this, as you said, we had
yeah.
this
I
previously. So it's,
think we had it previously. Yeah,
but it's nice that this one made the cut.
yeah.
So there's one reason to play US for me.
Cool. So we'll
Team weapons next, though, eh?
team weapons. Yeah. So you've got, as you'd expect, you've got your bazookas, you've got your HMG, you've got your MMG. You don't get the extra selection rule anymore, so you can't do the three in one slot for your machine guns. You got your sniper team, you got your flamethrower team that we've mentioned a bit before. You get your war dogs. War dogs are quite cool. So obviously they don't appear as a slot in the sense of they're not in a heavy weapons platoon or an infantry platoon and so on. So you buy war dogs, A, because they're cool models, B, they're thematic, C, because they spot they reveal hidden units. How you would take them, you may take 0 to 1 war dog team in addition to the normal infantry allowed for any rifle platoon that includes at least 1 unit of US Marines. So if you wanted a source of cheap order dice, you've maxed out your 4 infantry selections in a rifle platoon, and you don't want to take a second rifle platoon. It's another way of getting up to 4 handlers, so 4 men who are tough fighters and stubborn, as an extra dice. So they are okay. They're not groundbreaking, but they're okay.
So you can only have one for every rifle platoon.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
good cheap dice, basically, isn't it? I
yeah.
do want to jump back to the extra selection, which you kind of skirted over,
Mm.
and the fact that that's gone because
Hmm.
I actually think that's a real shame. I actually think that was one of the ways we make the US unique is to have the
Mm.
extra selection. I think taking that away, then you have made them Brits basically. Like they're
Yeah.
Brits effectively now, because they're not faster than Brits. They've got the Brits national characteristic, and they're not getting the special weapons. I suppose the Brits don't get the HMG team generally, but
No.
because machine guns aren't good,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
someone wants to rock up with heavy weapons with what can we have now? 5 times 3. You could have 15 MMGs.
Yeah.
More power to them. Like that's fun. I don't
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
I don't see why we had to get rid of extra selection. Like I understand that they listened to the no free units thing. But
Yeah.
extra selection wasn't free units, and I don't think it was abusive in this specific case either.
I do hope that when we get to Armies of Soviet Union and Armies of Japan, we see this for them so that they don't get the extra selection rule that they currently benefit from with regards to AT rifles and
Yeah,
AT teams.
and I think that's why they've gotten rid of it. I think there is a blanket mental because those ones can be ridiculous because it's so cheap to get
Yeah.
an extra three. But the machine gun team isn't particularly cheap. He's not particularly effective. He's fixed. So if you
Yeah.
run exclusively machine gun teams, you're going to have a very hard time in movement and objective missions. And so it's a bit of a shame because I think that was just fun and very harmless, basically.
Yeah.
Should we move into motor teams though, or do
Yeah.
you want to visit the heavy weapons rifle team first? Because that's interesting.
Okay, go on. Yeah, we'll visit this. So this one's quite cool. So you may take a heavy weapons rifle team instead of either a mortar or a machine gun team in any heavy weapons platoon. What you get is a three-man squad, inexperienced regular or vet. You upgrade them at +7, 10, or 13. One of them can have a SMG, and they get the air, land, and sea rule for airborne rangers and marines. So if you particularly want to take a lot of infantry squads, but you're limited to one rifle platoon, for example, you've taken your four infantry squads in the rifle platoon, but you still want more. Even if you've buffed up your officer team at the same time, you can basically take a heavy weapons platoon, but swap out one of those MG or mortars for these. It's just a nice, interesting little option.
Yeah, I think as you said, the place you'll see this is where you have platoon restrictions,
Yeah,
and someone's already filled their rifle platoon with other stuff, and they just need some more bodies, basically. Because
yeah,
30
yeah,
points is very reasonable.
yeah, yeah. I'd say so. Yeah, yeah.
And
Your
then we've
last
just got
three, yeah,
just the usual mortar teams, isn't it?
light, medium, and heavy. Your light mortars come as both 2 and 3 man options, depending on if they're Army, Marines, Airborne, or Rangers.
Yeah, that was a fairly stand. That was something that happened in V2, and it was quite
Yeah.
nice that you have two and three. Obviously, in V2, the benefit was you got small team, whereas
Yes.
now I'd rather have the
Yeah,
extra body.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Unless you're really tight on points.
Well, should we jump into artillery, Phil? I'll start us off with the light, medium, heavy is as pretty standard with,
Hmm.
and the air, land, and sea is as you'd expect, where the paratroopers can only carry light guns, obviously, on their gliders, etc.
Yeah.
And then if there's nothing from you on those three, we'll
No.
move into the recoilless, where interestingly they've tied together the two V2 entries for the
Mm.
recoilless into a single entry, where now instead of having the two different pin values, because I think with pins going down, how
Yes.
could you make it even worse? And so now they're both just light howitzers, basically, aren't they?
Yeah. So the recoilless artillery. So it's a late war. It can be taken as a marine or just as an option. It's effectively a lighthouse for 45 points, or 54 for veteran.
Which is cool enough. And
Yeah.
then we finally brought back the thing that was notably absent from the main rulebook, haven't we?
Yeah, we have the multi-launcher back. So this is a late war 4-man multi-launcher. You can take it as a Marines option. 46 points in experience, 65 points regular, 85 points veteran.
I mean, nice to have it back. Not
Yeah.
particularly noteworthy. Nothing's really changed from V2.
No.
AA guns, though, you wanted to talk about, didn't you? Because there's something
Yeah, so
quirky going on with them.
yeah, so you got 3 entries for sort of autocannon. So you've got a heavy autocannon on the rotating platform. You've got a twin light autocannon on a rotating platform, and then you've got your dual purpose AA-AT gun, which is effectively a super heavy anti-tank gun on a rotating platform. What's interesting is you can't take a single autocannon on its own. So the 35-point single autocannon that a lot of other nations can take isn't available. You have to take the twin if you want the light version, which I thought was worth saying. The one I'm quite sad about is the M51 multiple machine gun carriage. So this is the quad HMG artillery piece. It's 110 points, so it's gone down in price from the main rule book. And the reason being, they've given it the cumbersome rule, and they are now treating it as a vehicle-mounted weapon system rather than an artillery piece. So the 24 shots that you used to get have now been halved. I don't think it was ever powered. in the main rulebook because it was 125 points in the main rulebook for 24 HMG shots. That sounds brilliant. It is, but it was a magnet for indirect fire,
Yeah.
or indeed it was a magnet for tanks or LMGs. So you didn't see them very often. When you did see them, you might get one or two good turns out of them, and then they were gone. Now I just don't think you're going to see them.
No, you're not. I agree. It's a bit of a mess. The one benefit is I think it's now got a price discount for the fact that it's cumbersome, which when
It
the
does,
FAQ
yeah.
was dropped and they didn't give it a price discount, just made it terrible. That's not the way to do it. So at least there's that, but you're right, they've made it pointless because unless you're going to keep a tow next to it to help you from ranging in, but then you're wasting 2 turns because you've got to get it in the tow and then out the tow,
Yeah,
and it's not going to shoot for those 2 turns. Waste of everyone's time that, yeah. And
yeah.
so
It,
rip,
yeah,
I guess.
it's a shame, and it's a cool model. Yeah, there we go. Anti-tank guns, light, medium, heavy.
Yeah. And that's it. I
That's
mean,
it.
if I can revisit the 88 effectively,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
the 90 millimeter,
yeah.
it's so compared to the 88, it's
Mm,
145 versus 190. You lose 2 men, but most importantly, you're losing the ability to fire as a medium howitzer. I think it's a bit like the quad carriage we were just talking about, where you might see them because they're not bad, but they're just not as good as an 88, in my
yeah.
opinion.
I mean, you've got everything you want in the sense of you've got howitzers, you've got anti-tank guns, you've got multi-launchers. So in that sense, in terms of artillery, you've got what you want. And I was going to say this at some point, and I'll say this sort of now. I guess if you look at the US in World War II, they were very very functional, to the point of sort of utilitarian. And it was like, I need this, I need that, I need that. I don't need multiple versions of the same thing. So you look at the Armies of Germany book, and there's a lot of repetition with only very slight kind of changes and differences. The US is very much like, this does this, this does this, this does this. We don't need to complicate it, and so on. On the flip side, it does create an absence of choice in the sense of, I've only got this option and that's it, which is a bit of a shame. So the ability to create some variety and sort of subtlety maybe doesn't exist with the US book, but maybe that was because of what they were like in the war.
Yeah, it's fine. I think the biggest drawback for me is it just doesn't feel unique anymore, the US. Like as you
Yeah,
say, the units were never the unique selling point. It was the national characteristics.
yeah.
Without that, yeah, I'm not sure. But should we move into the vehicles and talk about how utilitarian they are?
Yeah, so Stuarts, lots of Stuarts. So you've basically got your M3 and your M5, and then you've got the various different combinations. Two things to notice on the M3. In the main rulebook, you had double MMG, whole mounted MMG as an option. So the Dakar M3 Stuart. That's now gone back to the whole mounted LMG. So it's two fewer shots, which is a shame. So the Dakar Stuart is not as Dakar as the main rulebook, and it's certainly not as Dakar as it was in V2. The Panzer 3 gets a lot more shots now.
But I do get to keep my US speciality of having Recce on it, which is
Yes.
nice.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's quite
definitely. Yeah.
nice. But I don't think the Dakar Stewart is much to talk about now, to be honest, these days with the
I mean,
half
I'm a fan
shots.
of it, and I've been using it, in V3 so far, and it's been effective. To be fair, not on its own, but three or four in one go, and it is effective.
That's true
Um,
of everything, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. To be fair, yeah. The M3A1 Stuart. This is worth pointing out. This is back. So this is an M3 Stuart, but you can add a hole mounted flamethrower as opposed to the MMG. So you get your turret mounted light AT gun, but you also get a hole mounted forward facing flamethrower. It is 40 points extra, and you can't take it with Recce, but that is quite a cool little loadout.
Yeah, if you
Um,
compare him to the Satan, just jumping a couple entries
mm,
ahead, 135 for the Satan, 165 for him.
mm.
The whole mounted one though has vulnerable, and so you're paying 30 points extra, but you get to keep your light anti-tank gun, but you are vulnerable. So I don't know. I think I'll go Satan every time.
Having tried Satan's, they really aren't much, but they ended up being mobile MG boxes
Yeah.
when I used them recently.
They're
Um,
more of a threat. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
definitely,
what they're
yeah.
there for. They're there for posturing. That's all they're there for.
Yeah, yeah, and I am a man of posture, as we know. In terms of your other Stuarts, you've got your M5 Stuart. They're quite cool. You get the reinforced front armor, so they're armor 8, but they're
Mhm.
armor 9 on the front, which is not bad, given the plethora of light 8 autocannons at the moment. So armor 9, you can't damage it from the front. And you get your M7, which is your M5 Stuart flamethrower tank as well.
If I can say something potentially hypocritical or controversial, but after complaining a lot about them rolling lots of entries into a single entry
Yeah.
in the minor nations,
Yes.
here the M7 they made four of, and
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
M5
Yeah.
entry you have the E7, which is like the prototype upgrade.
Yeah.
We actually probably could have just rolled the M7 as an option for the M5 because it is an
So I
M5 that's just been modified, isn't it?
it is exactly. I think the reason why the M7 has a separate entry is you can specifically make it from the M5 Stuart Warlord Games kit.
Ah, I see. So it's because of model availability, basically, is why they've
I
included
think
this.
so, yes, because you're right. It is essentially it's the E7 but better, and the E7 appears in the M5 Stuart upgrade options.
Yeah, actually, the E7 is better, isn't it? Because it's the same point, but with the reinforced front armor.
Yeah, and you get reinforced front armor in the M7 as well.
Oh, so that it's identical.
It's identical, yeah. It's just there was a slight historically there was a slight change as they developed the M7, but it appeared so late.
I mean, what's interesting actually is you could take. We've spent a long time on something that is fairly irrelevant,
There was only
but
four of them, yeah.
with the E7, because the way the options are laid out, I believe I could take an E7 with a hedgerow cutter,
Yeah, you
which would
could.
be fun. Plow
Yeah,
it, just plow through a hedge and
plowing
then
through your
hose
hedge
people
and
down with flames.
yeah,
I don't know how historical that is, but that'd be fun.
yeah,
And then the Chaffee, which is one of my favorites of all time. Just I think it's a really cool looking tank.
yeah, yeah,
And in V2, it never really lived up to its hype because it looks like it's supposed to whiz around,
yeah.
but they've addressed that, haven't they?
Yeah, it does. So it's the first entry that has the fast rule. And you can take Recce if you want to as well. So Chaffee is a good vehicle anyway. It's that great combination of a medium AT gun on a light tank. So it's an 8+ tank, but with a medium AT gun, which is great. It's got Recce, take it as veteran, and you get gyro stabilizers, and you get the fast rule. So the ability to whiz around the sides, scoot for a shot at the end of the turn, start of the next turn, you do the shot, or Recce away if you need to. It's a good little tank.
Yeah, I agree. I think giving it the fast rule is it. We're going to see it now. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
Lees and Grants, we all know and love them. They've got two guns, very cool. Is there anything
Yep.
you want to say on all the different variations, other
Not
than they
really.
don't?
Just it just depends on how much armor you want, effectively, in
Yeah.
terms of are they vulnerable, are they not, gyro stabilizers and that sort of thing.
Well, the only thing I noted is that I don't see any gyro stabilizers on them. That was my only note
Uh,
to add. That I didn't
M
see any.
the M3A5 Lee gives you it.
So both your anti-tank guns are gyro stabilized.
Yeah,
Oh,
if it's veteran. Yeah,
that's interesting because I think it says in gyro stabilized just the main gun, doesn't it? It's anti-tank gun. Oh,
and they're
okay.
both they're
So
both they're both anti-tank guns. So the
so any
MGs, yeah,
yeah.
but yeah.
So
So
anti-tank
that's
guns, it's been changed from main gun now
yes
to
to
uh-oh, I've just spotted a problem.
go on.
But I'll wait until we get to it and then I'll
Okay.
ring the problem bell.
Okay. Yeah, that's an expensive option, but with the new plastic M3 kit, M3 Lee kit coming out, I think you're going to see a lot of these as well. If you're running, well, actually, I'll flag this. I was going to say, if you're running early war, Operation Torch, then you're going to see a lot of Lees. But a lot of these entries for the Lees are mid-war, and they didn't really appear in the Pacific, and they weren't massively around in Italy either. But anyway, go on. Are we at the problem yet, or are
Should
we
we
getting
move to
onto it?
Shermans?
Lots of Shermans. Yeah,
All the same ones, basically. I don't think we've gained any Shermans, have we?
I don't think so. No, you've got your 75 mil, you've got your slightly improved HE, you've got your Cullen hedgerow cutters. Some of them easily catch fire, some of them don't. You've got your howitzer options, your flamethrower options, your
Calliope.
your multi-launcher options. You've got your swimming options, your DD, yeah, your
All the fun.
dozers, all the fun.
Now, the thing at the end of the Shermans, just before the Calliope, the 105. Now, V2, he was gyro stabilized. And this is what I realized when I was saying there's a problem. What I hadn't noticed on first review of this is the 105s no longer have gyro stabilized.
Yes.
Rip.
That's a shame. That was a really good little thing. There's the Sherman 105 with gyro stabilizer and V2.
That's the one that I would run, and because it's expensive. It wasn't an auto include for me. Like I wasn't putting in every list, but if I was going to be taking a tank to a tournament, the 105 was the one that I liked. And now, especially now that you're hitting on a 4, because the anti-tank guns are already getting a perk in a tank because you're hitting on a 3-up if you stand still.
If you stand still, yep.
Yeah, so they're getting the gyro stabilized, and then the howitzer is on a 4 stand still and a 5 moving.
5 move with no benefit from gyro stabilizer, yeah.
And so actually, that's a real shame for the 105. I think he might have seen his day in the sun there. We might
Can
not
I
see
tempt
him.
you with a Persian instead then, as the final tank option?
Possibly. I mean, he's big.
He's big, yeah.
He is big. Armor 10. He's expensive. 325.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm more tempted by crocodiles and zippos and stuff.
I'm glad you said this because we know that I love my LBTs, and actually I do think they are seriously worth looking at. LVT Alligator, 135 points regular. Yes, it's 7+ armored carrier. It's not open topped. It's closed topped. It's got a Stuart turret basically, so it's got a light AT gun with a coax MG. It's got 2 Pintle MMGs. You can make the MMG, so you can make the coax MMG into an HMG. It's amphibious, which is always amusing when you start just driving through pieces of water that otherwise are impassable and so on. It's a cool model. I love the LVT. The Rubicon LVT is such a nice model.
Yeah, and the one with the flamethrower, 105 points, very reasonable price. I mean, he's not going to survive very long with 7+, and obviously he's got the fuel tanks that could explode.
Yeah, and it's open topped as well, the flamethrower version, which is a shame. So,
but I mean, you take 4 of them, and he's
and everything's good if you take 4 of them. Yep,
that's the rule. That's what I've been saying since the start of V2, I think.
Your tank destroyer. So you took an M6 a lot. The M6 was the Dodge
the GMC.
with the rear facing. Yeah. What's your thoughts now in V3?
I don't know, because of the on a 6 he gets destroyed now. He used to always survive a long time. What I've been finding in V3 is these soft skinned ones aren't as good as they used to be unless they've got recce. Yeah. And so I haven't been putting them into any lists. I've been sort of the fantasy lists when you're just messing around. He's not, because he hasn't had a price reduction for that loss either. So
No. So I've been playing around with no tank lists, and the Welsh Nationals list. My Welsh Nationals list has no tanks in it. The lists are in now, so I'm quite happy to talk about it. I've got loads of bazookas in Jeeps, basically, amongst other things. 65 points gets you an M6, movement 12 inches, 48-inch range. Okay, you got to revert. You got to fire it. You got to pivot it so it fires from the rear, but you're getting the 2 pivots now and so on. 78 points gets you a regular bazooka with a regular Jeep.
Yeah, you can see that was always the argument though in V2. I think for me, do you know what I think it is? I think it's the hitting on a 4 base now.
Yeah, okay.
Which means that most of the time I'm hitting on a 5, whereas in V2, a lot of the time I was hitting on a 4 because I'd only moved. Because the 12 inches meant I was usually within 24 inches of the target. Now I'm hitting on a 5. It's
8 M6 GMCs, two armored platoons.
Yeah, the problem is the rifle.
4's good. 8 is better, surely. Doubly better, if not more.
I think if you come up against armor, 100%, the problem is you come up against rifle only list.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
now your pins don't matter anymore. Because the other thing that was quite nice is you'd shoot a little 1 inch template out and put 2 pins out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that doesn't really matter anymore. You're hitting on like big now. You're hitting on, well, yeah, because obviously it's a anti-tank gun, so were you getting the +1 to
You
hit with
still get
this?
you still get a +1 because it's an anti-tank gun. It doesn't matter if it's soft skin or not.
Is that right? Is it not armored
Yeah.
vehicles
Yeah.
that get the plus
No. No.
one?
No. No. It's anti-tank guns because static
Hmm.
anti-tank guns get the +1 to fire at armored
Oh,
vehicles.
there we go.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so now I think, yeah, the risk of getting wrecked by rifles, not being as effective against riflemen, alongside movement being a 1 in 3 chance of hitting now. Um,
Mm,
I don't know. He's lost his luster.
okay.
But should we
Can I
move
borrow
into?
yours then?
Mhm.
If you're not using them, can I borrow them? Because I want to try them out.
Yeah,
I
sure.
do think there's something here.
I've got at least two, so
Uh,
certainly, yeah,
well, I want another six, and so I've got eight. But yeah,
yeah. Well, I've
I
got another
genuinely
six
do
dodges
think
you could proxy. To be
that
fair.
perfect. I reckon there is something here. Seriously.
Yeah, I don't know. I think when we get to transports, I think I'll raise the other reason why when we
Yeah,
get to the
yeah, yeah.
transports, because I actually think there's another reason. Like, it's not that this has been is bad; it's that there's something else that's a much better choice.
Okay.
But into the other anti-tank guns, it's like you got
Yeah,
the M3, which is nice. I think that's really cool. The half-track one.
yeah, yeah.
The usual M10, 18, 36.
Yeah.
But the one noteworthy thing,
Drum roll.
all the people on the internet who've been complaining about this for years,
Mhm.
the Hellcat gets fast.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Hellcat gets past. So the
put
second
those fingers
and
down. No
yeah,
need to type it. The Hellcat is fast. It's been acknowledged.
yeah, and I think this is an interesting choice as well. It's quite expensive. You know, it's 160 points for a recce Hellcat, 185 if you add the Pintle MMG. So it is expensive, but it's pretty good. You know, it's not quite a one shot because you got to hit, but if you do hit, you're going to take stuff out.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? The only thing that annoys me is that the Pintle's so expensive because I like having
Yeah.
the Pintle on as well because it's open top anyway. But 25 points isn't too bad a price now. Self-propelled artillery, the M8, which I love, but it's not that effective because it's only a light howitzer. But I do think it looks cool as anything.
So what hasn't copied across or carried across from V2 is the it was the M8 in the Pillau in Mariana and Pillau had the special
Canister
ammo
rounds.
canister rounds. Yeah,
I
they
think
have.
couldn't the Stewart have them as well? Actually,
Can't remember. Even anyway, they don't appear, and that's a real
yeah.
shame because that was quite a nice little feature. To the point where some tournaments banned them, didn't they? Because they were pretty effective.
Well, I think it was also one of those weird ones where they didn't do a good job of explaining how you use them in terms of
Okay,
the selectors and stuff. Like, is it a generic upgrade? Is it specific to
right. Okay,
selectors, et cetera, et
yeah,
cetera?
yeah.
And so I think it left it to tournament organizers to decide not so much
Right.
banning them, but allowing them because there wasn't explicit rules about using them, I think.
Okay,
Um,
fair dues.
but then you've got like your other ones, you've got the Priest, you've got the M12, you've got the M40, you've
Yeah,
got the M3 again, but with a howitzer.
yeah.
Oh, the M3 with a
This,
105.
yeah. That's not a bad shout. 125 points for a hole-mounted forward-facing medium howitzer on the half track, 7+ open tops.
Yeah, not a lot to note with them, I would say. The motor carriers were always cool,
Yep.
especially because it's got an HMG in a 360 Pintle, so
Mm.
perfect for shooting down your own aircraft there.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And you've also got a choice of whether you want the motor to be facing forward or backwards, whether you take the
Mhm.
M4, the M21. Um, I think you'd probably want forward, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Otherwise, you got to faff around with double pivots
Showing your
and
bum, all the rest of
rear
it.
armor and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
And so even if I had the M4 model, I'd just run it as an M21 effectively
Okay.
because same price
Yeah.
and everything. I can't imagine many opponents would complain about that. The
Yep.
motor Jeep, if you want a light motor on a Jeep rather than a medium motor on a half track. And then you've got an LVT, which is interesting. 115 points for a light howitzer and an
Yes, this
HMG.
is the lighthouser version of the LBT. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. To be honest, I'd rather pay 125 points for the light anti-tank gun rather than the howitzer because the pins are D2 pins, isn't it, for a light howitzer?
Yeah.
No, it's a D3.
It's D2 now, I think, yeah.
D2. Anyway, it's not worth it. I'd rather have the light AT gun with the Stuart turret. What I do like to see though is the rocket truck, which is the multi-launcher on a truck. That said, it is soft skin, and it does have the stationary firing platform. So
Yeah, we haven't made a big deal of that yet, but actually, I think when we were talking about Armies of Germany, etc., we probably should have talked about this more. That the stationary firing platform or questionable firing platform, whatever it's called in whatever book you're reading, having to stand still means that actually you're better off running the artillery version every time.
yeah. Yeah,
Because
but if you really want a lot of multi launches, you can do it for your armored platoon and your artillery platoon if you're that
yeah,
guy.
and I think that's the way to go. Like if you're limited to one platoon of each,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
you really want to take 8 multi launchers, that's the way to go. But I think generally we're not going to see these in the way we did in V2 because of the selectors.
So they're nice and thematic though. You know, late war US Marines. They are nice and thematic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of the stationary firing platform, moving on to the anti-aircraft vehicles, I am pleased to see that the M15, the M13, and the M16 don't have the stationary firing platform rule.
Yeah, which is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then actually, if we can talk about the soft skins and their mounts,
Mm.
now the Quad 50,
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather have this than the vehicle mounted version that's actually an artillery piece.
Yeah,
And so you can't move for 5 points more.
yeah.
Actually, 4 HMGs on a soft skin, it's pricey. 105, I think, probably makes it not worth taking, but
No.
it's pretty interesting though.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. The Greyhound, because when I went to the armored cars, sorry.
Armored car, yeah, with all 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah, the thing that is interesting with the Greyhound is I thought he'd get fast.
Yeah, yeah,
But so it's a bit
yeah,
weird that he didn't, but
yeah.
maybe they just don't want too many things having fast too early on to get.
And by the same logic, you'd have thought the M20 would as well, the scout car. Yeah.
Yeah, but actually, doesn't fast just mean that tracked vehicles move as.
Well, that's true. Actually, yeah, they move at 12 and 24. Yeah,
So actually, it doesn't really matter.
it's irrelevant. Yeah, we can
Yeah,
we'll call them fast without having the keyword fast.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what they could have done was make fast additional inches on your move, and then certain
Okay,
vehicles
so
could have
not
had it.
upgrading from track to wheeled, but just X inches more, as it were.
Yeah, because our turns don't matter anymore, really, either, do
No,
they?
yeah, they don't. No, 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 no,
And so
no.
actually, just saying you get an extra 3 inches could make all the difference.
Yeah. Jeeps, you've got a recce Jeep, you've got a US Airborne armored Jeep, and you've got an armored Jeep with twin bazookas, which I think you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, this is when we were talking about the intelligence squad, wasn't it? That this was a real faff because you had to. I think the rule was in Battle of the Bulge, I think it was, you could take your twin bazooka Jeep, but you had to take an intelligence squad, and it all became a bit muddy. Now you just get it, and it's pretty cool. I don't think it's super powerful. It's armor 6. It can't be damaged by small arms from the front because it's got front
Yeah.
armor.
Mm-hmm.
It's got 2 bazookas on a single mount, so I guess they're firing at the same target.
Same target. Yeah.
145 points.
Yeah. No.
I don't know why he's not 105, the same as the quad HMG, because he seems about that. Or 110, let's say, because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think 2 bazookas is worth the same as 4 HMGs in my sort of like head maths, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'd rather take 2 bazookas than a Jeep. Okay, I can't get both bazookas in the same Jeep, but I'd rather have 3 dice for 138 points regular, 2 bazookas and 1 regular Jeep. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think we're going to see him much really, other than people think he's cool. And if
Yeah.
you've converted one historically,
The
now's
model's
your
cool.
chance.
Well, Rubicon now, the Rubicon pack includes a twin bazooka upgrade as standard on the in the box, which is cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. Transports. My favorite, the M3 Scout car.
Yep.
Yeah, and then every flavor of half track. If you want 10 men, if you want 12 men, if you want 1 MG, HMG, some medium machine guns, pretty much whatever you want in terms of M2, M2A1, M3, and so on. Now the Weasel is one to point out. I
Yeah,
like the
because he
Weasel.
had about 6 different entries, I think, over the
Yeah,
course of
yeah.
V2. And so it's nice that we have a standard one now.
So it's 45 points regular for a 7+ 5-man transport, which can also tow light guns. You can make it amphibious if you want, and then you lose the the towing option, obviously, because you can't tow the gun through water. But a little 5-man, 45-point armored transport, guys jump out with SMGs, etc., etc. That is worth considering because the scout card is like 68 points, I think, for a regular.
Yeah, 23
Yeah,
points. But for those
yeah.
23 points, though, you
You
get
get
an extra.
recce and an HMG and 3 more transport
Yeah,
slots.
you get an
Yes.
extra 3 seats.
Yeah.
Well, you don't get recce as a transport version, do you? You just get an extra 3 seats in an
Well,
HMG.
you don't unless you put it in a recce platoon. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then you'd be paying 78
You
points.
pay
But
78.
but if we just do the 68 versus the
Mm.
45, 3 extra seats in an HMG, I'm doing that every time for 20 points, I think, if I'm going
Yeah.
for an armor 7. Because my one thing on the Weasel is if he had a gun, he'd be brilliant. And it wouldn't have to be anything specific. I just wanted to put out one pin when it
Do something
arrives.
as well as
So
drive.
when the
Yeah.
squad
Yeah.
jump out, they're putting on a second pin rather than the first, because then it
Yeah.
means that when they get return fire, it's at -1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Jeeps, trucks, and trucks. The
Yep.
Dodge. We're just not going to see the Dodge anymore as much as
I
we used
I
to.
disagree. So
Okay.
this is why I think. So when we were talking about the M6 GMC, and I was
Mm.
saying actually the reason it's fallen out of favor is because of the Dodge, because you for 30-point upgrade, so 53 points.
Mm.
I've got an HMG.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got a squad inside. So what I do is I rush forward with, let's say, like my bazooka or my engineers inside to go and target that vehicle. Because of the point blank benefit now, which didn't exist in V2,
Yeah.
you rush that dodge right up to someone's rear armor onto their side. If you get within point blank, that HMG is really dangerous with three shots.
Mm.
And actually, that's what I'm doing. Instead of the M6 GMC, I'm running HMG dodges, which is something
Yeah.
I was trialing at the end of V2. And actually, the point blank benefit has made it really good in V3.
Yeah, but you can't because I've borrowed all your Dodges and your GMCs to try out my little idea. So sorry.
Well, to be fair, I'm still salty about fire maneuver, so
It's
it'll probably
irrelevant.
be V4 by the time I want them back.
Your rest of your transport options, you got your artillery tractor, which I know you enjoyed with the HMG mount.
Hmm.
You got your ducks, you got your LVT amphibious troop transport, which is your 6+, or your water buffalo. I love the water buffalo.
Who
Actually,
doesn't? What a
I'm going to talk
dream.
about this for a little bit. 100 points regular, 2 pintle mounted MMGs, 7+ armored carrier. 30 men, which is just hilarious. You could put your entire force in it if you really wanted to, or a Jeep or a light medium artillery unit. The bit where I think it does get interesting, it's expensive. You can upgrade your Pintle MMGs to HMGs for 20 points for the pair, and then you can stick a forward-facing hull-mounted MMG. So for 130 points, you get basically a Dakar light, light armored vehicle, 7+. Yes, it's open top, but you've got 3 pins a turn you can put out with the forward-facing hull-mounted MMG and the 2 individual HMGs. You can pin armored vehicles. You start putting engineers inside or guys with SMGs, for example, and it's quite a tasty little thing. It is expensive, but
Yep.
and it looks cool as well, which is also worth shouting out.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is you could put a whole recce platoon in this fella. You could make him recce, put your whole recce
Yeah,
platoon
yeah, oh yeah,
inside
yeah,
of
yeah,
him,
yeah,
and then it basically just opens up those options. Again, like we're saying, if you're playing single company games where you can't add more rifle platoons and you want more rifles,
yeah,
stick them in a buffalo, have
yeah,
all that fun. I think personally, I probably wouldn't add the MMG. I think I'd go 120 plus 10 points for recce
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and just
yeah.
have 2 HMGs, is what I'm
So
thinking.
something I have done, or not at an event yet, is leaning into the air observer, taking recce platoon to access another air observer, and in order to have the transport, is making my buffalo recce,
Yeah.
and it's perfectly legit kind of thing. But suddenly you've got like a lot of options in terms of you get an extra bazooka slot, you get another air observer slot. You haven't got to buy a bunch of vehicles because you just shove them in an armored tin can that's massive, but also has recce. So
Yeah. If we can just go back a second, I noticed the duck is
mm.
amphibious, but it's no more expensive than a truck. That's the same, which is nice.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
27 points for a truck, 27 points for a duck. You
Yeah.
might as well take all ducks and then be waterborne, I guess.
Yeah, they'd be mighty, wouldn't they?
Yeah, indeed.
Whoosh.
Well, they are ludicrously long as well.
Yeah,
That's the other thing is you could build a real wall with them.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and then we've got some landing crafts right at the end. LVT A2, and then different LCM and LCP.
which is interesting because they are water only,
Yes, the
which
LCP and LCM. Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
we didn't see in the armies of Germany. We didn't get the
Oh, you
because
get
there
a
are.
barge. There's a barge, isn't there, in the
Was
armies
there
of
a
Germany?
barge? I don't
Yeah,
remember a
there's a
barge
barge. Yeah,
because I
yeah,
know
yeah.
we lost our flob sack.
Yeah, there is a barge, yes, because I've seen people trying to justify recce platoons with a barge as the compulsory transport.
But my reflection anyway, it's a shame we didn't get the flob sacks for the Germans.
Yep.
But also, it's promising for the Soviets. Do you know what I mean? If we're getting water only vehicles, I know you've got a favorite
Oh,
Soviet.
yeah, the Bronekita. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a Soviet army, but to be honest, I would consider it purely to be running that. It's just
Well,
an
surely it's going to be so
awesome
many
idea.
points. You're not going to need to buy many
No,
additional
it'd be the
units anyway.
cheapest financial army I've ever bought. Yeah, never mind the points cost. Yeah.
And then we've got finally in the armies of the United States V3, two ambulances, and one of them's armored, which is fun.
Yeah, you can take a half track ambulance. Yeah, yeah, which it's pretty cool for thematic ideas. Yeah,
Yeah, and then the book basically ends with some example armies, which I'm not sure many people are going to look at. They'll probably flick through unless you're sort of a new player. I
I was going
imagine
to say
might
as a
be
new player, it'd
useful.
be helpful, and you've got your
Mhm.
early, mid, late unit list right at the end for those who want to keep it sourced to a
Yeah.
time period.
To be honest, how many pages we got there? It's 111 pages in total.
Mm.
The units end on page 90. I actually think what would have been better for those, let's say 20 pages, would have been to print the theatre selectors from V2. Just not like in full
Mm-hmm.
with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
zero
yeah,
to ones, but like units that were at, I don't know, the Battle of the Bulge, units that were in the Ardennes Forest,
yeah.
units that were here.
Guadalcanal. Yeah,
And that would have been far more useful for both new and experienced players to have
yeah, yeah, yeah,
lists. And it would also be useful for TOs to be able to say, refer to page 115
yeah,
when you've tried to build this army list. I think a lot of those units weren't there. For guidance, go to page 115 and just resubmit that list for me, please.
yeah.
But there we go. There's Armies of the United States. For anyone
Mm.
who was excitedly waiting for it to see if it was much different from the main rulebook, I think at this point we can say it's not much different from the main rulebook, other than the rocket launcher's back.
Yeah, there's not a huge stuff. It's not a huge amount that's different. The rocket launcher's back, the rocket launcher truck, the recoilless rifle. I do like the mechanized infantry. I think that is something to look at. In terms of definitely an interesting build there around half tracks, mechanized infantry, and kind of playing around with that in terms of access to bazookas and so on. Yeah.
But yeah, no Ranger Force for me.
No Ranger Force for you. No, 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 no. What I'm disappointed with. Okay, and go and make a cup of tea if you really like the US and so on. This book here, Tough Gut. Tough Gut introduced some amazing units for the US, and I'm not talking about the French units that fell under the US command. I hope they appear in a French supplement down the line. But there were some really interesting units in Tough Gut, and to an extent, Soft Underbelly. Things like the 44th Infantry guys who basically stubborn army guys, regular stubborn army guys, but weren't Marines and weren't Paras.
Mm.
You had the FSSF squad, and who had they had the recce option, didn't they, and stuff. The armies of US for me, it's fine. It's perfectly perfunctory. It's fine. I'm still going to play them. I love my Marines. I really enjoy painting them. I love the LVTs, etc. Why would I choose a US army over a German army? It's probably going to come down to air power if I want to lean into air observers, gyro stabilizers if I want more than one vehicle with a buff as opposed to Panzer Ace, or because I've got the models already. I can't take infiltrators as a US player, but I can take Spar Trooper in terms of Germany. I can take military police for both Germany and US. I got the military police in the US, and I got the Feldenkorps and Feldgendarme in that, and so on. I've got so many other options in the armies of Germany that I'm just disappointed that the Armies of US doesn't make me, if I was a new player, make me want to run out and buy it. And I kind of, to be fair, I did sort of say this about the Armies of Germany as well. But actually, in the last few months, I have kind of warmed towards the Armies of Germany book, particularly in contrast to the US. It's fine, but it's not like groundbreaking, exciting. I've been waiting for this and so on. Even something as simple as giving, the Marine option as tough fighters. Be like, okay, here's a pointer's differential. I can take stubborn powers, I can take Rangers lead the way, or I can take tough fighter Marines, because there is a place for close combat in V3. Maybe not as much as V2, but there is a place.
Yeah, I mean, if you do want there to be a place for close combat, then you do have to build units that are good at close combat, which
Yeah,
isn't happening because then at least, yes, it's not their day to really shine, but at least they can try it.
yeah,
But we don't have that. There's not. I guess you could take your cavalry squads. At least the cavalry can charge, which is something
yeah.
that a lot of cavalry can't do.
True.
But
Yeah,
it is such a small part of the war that actually building a fully themed list around it is very limiting. You're very
yeah,
much like putting yourself in a corner there. For me, it's just a bit disappointing, isn't it? It's like the one thing that made US unique has been removed. They haven't added anything, and so it's just
no,
like uninspired. It's unimaginative, and as you said, it's incomplete. Like there's a lot of stuff that didn't make the transition through.
mm,
It feels like I think I said this while we we're recording at some point. It's like a get you buy list. It's like it's got everything you need to play the game, guys. It's yeah, it does. Like there's nothing wrong with it. It's
yeah,
like there's a couple of things we didn't like and a couple of like typos, like with the SMGs that we didn't like that you're paying for tough fight
yeah.
and SMGs,
There,
which I don't think was intentional.
no, actually, on that note, there's a lot less
Yeah. And that's
typos and,
good.
and points, which is good compared
But
to what
equally,
we
like
picked out on the main rulebook in Germany.
yeah, but equally the measure of a good game isn't how good the English is in the game. Like the
Yeah,
measure of a good game is how like interesting the mechanics are, how exciting the mechanics are a lot of the time. Like the things that make people play games aren't how accurately written the rulebook
no,
is
sure, sure.
necessarily. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's the imaginative stuff and the fun stuff you can do. The fun stuff you can do has been subdued by the fire maneuver become rubbish. They haven't added anything. Like there's nothing in here that's new. This is just armies of Germany, but with less options. And so
Different
as
different uniforms and accents. Yeah,
yeah, and so I agree with you. Like there's nothing here that makes me want to play US, other than having heavy machine guns. That's
yeah,
that's literally the only thing that is interesting me at all. Now, if I could take everything with lead the way
yeah,
and do a
yeah,
full
yeah,
range of force,
yeah.
we might be talking because put them in ducks, that'd be fun. Um, but yeah, I'm really disappointed to be honest. It's quite a disappointing book, and I think you're right. I think it might grow a little bit in the way like
Mm,
Germany did, but anything that I'm thinking about doing, I'm more interested in doing with Germany now than I am with US.
okay, yeah. I think what the acid test will be is looking at armies of Great Britain and seeing how much of a development there's been from V1, V2, GB to V3 compared to US, for example, because there have been changes in Germany in terms of the national characteristics and that sort of thing. US does feel pretty generic. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not going to stop playing them because I say I do like my Marines. I like the theme, I like the painting, all that kind of stuff. And there are some interesting things that I will try out with them. Um, I think if I was coming into the game with no experience of bolt action and I asked an experienced player what nation would I choose, I don't think the US is going to be high up there unless you love Band of Brothers, you love the Pacific, or there is a personal reason to kind of lean into it, family reason, whatever it is.
yeah, absolutely.
In game mechanics, there's not a lot going for them, if much at all, compared to, like you said, some of the other get you buy lists. The Finns are way more flavoursome in a get you buy list in some ways than the armies of US, which is a shame.
Yeah, there's actually one of the things that did make the US unique, which I was just revisiting there as we were talking, was the sniper team could take SMGs. And so for
Mm-hmm.
56 points, you could have two regular blokes with SMGs. I've just had a look there. It's now 6 points each to give them SMGs. So it's 52 points base, and then another 12 points to give them SMGs. Makes zero sense whatsoever, which basically just means you're not going to see them. Even to be fair, even if that was 4 points, I don't think you'd see them. It needs to be like 3 points, let's say. And that was a really fun thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
my criticism was going to be that actually we can't take enough snipers to really maximize the use of that, because that would be a really cool force to have a Rangers force with 3 snipers
Armed with SMGs,
armed with SMGs.
infiltrating.
It would be very thematic as well to have like your Rangers and have 3 trained marksmen
Yeah,
with them who've advanced
forward
forward.
deploying. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be really thematic. And then obviously, yeah, all the rest of it. But yeah, like you can't take the SMGs anymore, really, unless you want to pay 12 points.
Yeah, that is weird. Yeah, I can say they're armed with, what the sniper's got a rifle, the assistant's got a pistol. If it was plus 5 points for the assistant, it's 1 point to make the pistol into a rifle and 4 points rifle to SMG. That makes sense. And 4 points for the rifle sniper, in inverted commas, to add an SMG. That makes sense. But 6 points each, I don't know where that costing's come from.
Yeah. No, me neither. If you do think that we're completely wrong and actually these rules are exciting and you're really looking forward to playing them, or if, as Phil alluded to, if you have a specific build you had planned for a long time, like Band of Brothers, Carentan, something like that, if you, and you are going to buy some models and the rules, please do use our affiliate link. It really does help the channel. And so I imagine a lot of people will go out and buy this. Even if we hadn't got a free copy, I think I would have went out and bought it just to have in my collection because it is a nice book, regardless of what we think of the rules in it.
Yeah, I 100% would have gone and bought it, and I absolutely, I'm going to carry on playing US. I was talking to someone the other day about this. I like the fact that even now, but also with the main rule book, they don't have a huge amount of options, which sort of just makes it a little bit easier in the sense of like, how am I going to play them in A, B, C, D, E, or F different ways, kind of thing. Right, off we go. Yeah, they're still going to be, my primary or my top two along with the Germans list to play at the moment. Yeah, I think the acid test comes when Britain comes out for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we have a similar level of thought put into the Brits rules where it's just basically rinse and repeat, like, oh, paratroopers get to be stubborn and and these get to be stubborn. And for 1 point, only if you're veteran, that'll be really disappointing. I think for me, the reason I was playing Americans in V2 is because you could have regular engineers, which the Germans couldn't have.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And also those 105s I thought were really cool. So I had like, I used to always run a 105. I was Rangers with a 105 was like my thematic play. Now the Germans get regular engineers. The 105 no longer is gyro stabilized.
Stabilize it. Yeah, yeah.
So if I'm going to go for like a fun, waste lots of points army list, I'm going to go Germans with a Panzer Ace and a big tank. If I'm going to go engineers, sort of like minimum squad MSU build, then I'm going to go Germans with regular engineers.
Yeah.
I guess if we're doing like a Recon Rumble type tournament where I want HMGs on soft skins because I know I'm not going to face big armor, but I do want some anti-tank. That might be the one time I run US, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I mean, tune in the future to see how my no tank Welsh Nationals list, US list does, along with my I'm going to spam M6 GMCs and see if that works.
Yeah, I'm sure it won't go too badly. To be fair, if you, as you said, if you take 4 of them, it's good. If you take 8, it's great.
Even better. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so that's the Armies of US. So again, big thank you to Osprey Games for sending us through the PDF and also the physical copy. As ever, genuinely interested in what you guys think out there. Are we wrong? If we are, please do point us out. Do engage with us and so on. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for getting this far as well.
Indeed. Thank you for listening. Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.